West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy with Chef Justice Putnam. Netrootsradio.com.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte.
So off the coast of northern Norway, the government there operates a field of undersea sensors that, among other things, can detect the movements of passing submarines. Unexpectedly, and in a still unexplained incident back in November, someone or something cut the cables linking those undersea sensors to their control stations on the shore. Cables were ripped out, the sensors themselves were messed with, but the cables were cut. And suspicion immediately fell on Russia as the potential culprit, particularly because they're known to have the capacity to mess with undersea cables. And they've done so before. But the incident, at least officially, remains unsolved, although lots of Norwegian sources, including government sources, have been sort of indicating that they're top suspect in this sabotage is the Russian military. Again, that happened in November. Then 2 weeks ago, it happened again. Another set of undersea cables off the coast of Norway were mysteriously cut. This time it was cables that, among other things, they supplied data to a huge commercial ground satellite array. A satellite array that Russia has been complaining about for years. Russia says that satellite array, they think it's secretly and illegally being used for military communications when it's not supposed to be. But that satellite array is not being used for anything now because somehow the undersea cables that supply data to it, they, again, appear to have been messed with. The cables appear to have been cut. And then there's Ireland. A couple of months before the first set of Norwegian undersea cables was mysteriously cut, a couple of months before that, the Irish government got righteously freaked out when this Russian ship turned up right off the coast of Donegal in northwest Ireland. Officially, this is an oceanographic research vessel that's operated by the Russian Navy, but it's a very high-tech, very recently built vessel. And in terms of its technical capacity, lots of governments around the world think that this is a huge spy ship, and they think specifically the Russian Navy built this ship to target undersea cables. Among other things, this ship can launch a bunch of different small manned submarines that can dive super deep. They can dive like 20,000 feet deep. And when this ship turned up off the coast, the west coast of Ireland in August, here's how the Times reported at the time on Irish worries that Russian ship weirdly maneuvering off the Irish coast might be messing with undersea cables and communications. See the headline there. Russian spy ship monitored off coast of Donegal. Quote, a Russian spy ship built to carry out clandestine undersea missions is being monitored by the defense forces off the west coast. The Yantar, which is part of the Russian Navy, arrived unexpectedly off the Donegal coastline on Tuesday night. The vessel is equipped with, again, this is in August last year. The vessel is equipped with manned and remote-operated submersibles used to attach listening devices to undersea cables that carry internet traffic between continents. There's at least one commercial subsea cable in the general region where the Russian vessel is loitering. The ship spent the early hours of Wednesday morning traversing the seas to the north of Mayo and west of Donegal in a zigzag fashion, suggesting it was searching for something beneath the waves using sonar. The ship moved to a location to the west of Killybegs, I guess is how you say it, Killybegs Fishing Harbor, yesterday afternoon. Before moving further out into the Atlantic, the vessel's behavior was described as highly suspicious by military sources. Again, that was August. Lots of worries. The Irish government, Irish Defence Forces, freaking out about that Russian spy ship off its west coast, particularly because it was in the vicinity of those cables and particularly because of what everybody thinks the Russians are doing with undersea cables right now in the advance, potentially, of its next invasion of Ukraine. Well, now, next week, again, off the coast of Ireland, Russia says it's going to mount major naval war games exercises. Look at this. Here's the Irish Times. Quote, the exact location of the drill is an area known as the Porcupine Sea Bight, southwest of Cork. That exact location is also causing anxiety in Ireland. If the purposes of the exercises are benign, it would be far easier for Russia to hold these exercises closer to its own shores. Military sources say it's not unheard of for foreign navies to conduct drills inside the Irish economic zone. But, quote, they usually have a good reason for it. It makes sense for the Royal Navy to conduct exercises in that area of the Atlantic because that's on their doorstep. It doesn't make practical sense for the Russians to be there, said one naval service source. If the Russian military exercises are linked to an invasion of Ukraine, they may serve one of several purposes, according to military planners. One is psychological, to remind NATO of the Russian Navy's freedom of movement, which may make NATO members think twice about launching retaliatory military action. Another possibility is strategic. If the situation in Ukraine deteriorates significantly, one of the first priorities of NATO would likely be to box in as much of the Russian fleet as possible into their ports. It is in Russia's interest to disperse its ships in international waters ahead of any such eventuality. For Ireland, the worst-case scenario is that Russia is positioning itself to disable the subsea infrastructure running along the southern coast and connecting Europe and North America. The Russian military drills next week are due to take place directly above the nexus of many of the internet cables that connect the two continents, that connect North America and Europe. Cutting those cables would immediately cripple the economies of NATO countries and Ireland. Cutting the cables was described by one naval source as the perfect counterpunch against any NATO or U.S. military response in Ukraine. Quote, if I wanted to invade Ukraine and hamstring my opponents, I would want to cut those cables. It would be lights out for the economy of Western Europe. I mean, every country in the world, every country in the West is worried about Russia potentially starting this new war. Everybody except for our friends at Fox News Primetime, who are apparently rooting for Russia in this instance and wouldn't mind a war. But elsewhere in the West, everybody's worried about it. And this is Ireland's very specific concern of how they might be in the middle of it in a way they really do not want to be in the middle of it. The problem is, for all of Ireland's concern about it, and for as forewarned and forearmed as they are about it because of that Russian spy ship turning off their coast just a few months ago, there's not much that Ireland itself can do about it. I mean, Ireland, I mean, no offense, but they do not have much of a navy. Ireland literally has no military radar in the entire country. They don't have military radar. They have navigational radar, but no military radar. Ireland does not have a single ship that's capable of, like, launching a helicopter off of it. They just don't have that kind of military capacity. So what can they do? Well, you know what Ireland does have to defend itself in this instance? It has very annoyed fishermen. Irish fishermen who are so mad about what Russia's going to do with these war games off their coast next week that the fishermen say that they personally have a plan to stop it.
Fishermen say they're considering plans to peacefully disrupt Russian naval exercises off the southwest coast next month.
The decision by the Russian Navy to conduct live gunnery and a missile firing exercise 160 nautical miles off the Mizzen next month is causing huge concern for fishermen gathered on the pier in Castletownbere this morning.
If someone came into your backyard and said they were doing a an army exercise, you wouldn't be happy about it either with live fire.
The Russian military exercise is due to take place over 5 days near the Porcupine Bight, an area within Ireland's exclusive economic zone, rich with prawns and blue whiting, giving rise to fears for the fishing grounds and marine life.
They're not going to be firing bow and arrows at each other, but I mean, so this is a live exercise and it is massive.
Fishermen say that up to 60 trawlers will fish in the area in peaceful protest in the hope that it'll disrupt the Russian manoeuvres.
So our protest is our presence outside there, that we're going to continue to fish out there, and we're raising the awareness that we're there when this is happening. The sea is our working environment. It's where we should be safe. We shouldn't be dealing with this type of interference with our livelihoods, and no communications about it.
In a statement this evening, the Russian embassy said that it had spoken to the fishermen's organisation and said that while it understands its concerns, any attempt to interfere with the military exercise would be a reckless and irresponsible act which could put both sailors and fishermen in harm's way. Jenny O'Sullivan, RTE News, Castletownbere.
It's not like they're going to be firing bows and arrows at each other. Fishermen say up to 60 trawlers will fish in the area in peaceful protest. Our protest is our presence. They told Politico today, quote, our boats will be going out to that area on the 1st of February to go fishing. When one boat needs to return to port, another will head out, so there is a continuous presence on the water. If that is in proximity to where the Russian military exercise is going on, we are expecting that the Russian naval services will abide by anti-collision regulations. Will abide by anti-collision regulations, which sounds well and good. But, sir, to be clear, do you mean you're going to go out there in your little Irish fishing boats and confront the Russian Navy? Yes. Yes, they are perfectly clear that is what they are going to do. This was Morning Ireland this morning on RTE.
So, are you planning to face down the Russians, Patrick?
Well, we're entitled to go fishing in areas outside there. This is our waters. Let me put it to you this way to everybody else to understand this. Can you imagine if the Russians were applying to go onto the mainland of Ireland to go launching rockets? How far would they get with that? It's no different to fishermen. This is our ground. This is our farm. This is where we earn our living. Why should somebody be able to come in and do that in our waters, in our territorial waters, just by your leave? This is a very important ground where fish come to spawn, the mackerel. And we don't know what's going on out here, So for us, we should be entitled to go fishing there. And if we're fishing there, then these boats and these vessels, warships, shouldn't be having war games. And not only that, these warships will be followed by submarines. And we have our gear out behind our boats. What if they get tangled in it? This has happened before. Boats have been sunk by these vessels. This is a real concern to us. And we, as in our industry, feel that nothing's being done here, like everything else, and we want to act, and this is how we're going to act, by working.
Yeah. It sounds a bit risky.
Sounds a bit risky. Indeed. But that is the plan. The whole world, to Vladimir Putin's great delight, the whole world is on tenterhooks waiting to find out whether Russia is going to start another war. Irish fishermen, on the other hand, are heading out to actively stop it and fish for mackerel while they're at it. God bless them, every single one of them.
It is Wednesday, the 26th of January of 2022, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam. Gunner, the English bulldog, is our snoozing sous chef, and our daily special is Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. Will no one rid us of these meddlesome priests? No one. Well, speaking of which, I got to tell you, the Justice Department and state investigations and grand juries are moving along quite nicely. Okay, I think there's a little bit more going on in the Justice Department than we're giving Merrick Garland credit for. So I hate that we have to judge Merrick Garland and the rule of law by what went on the previous 4 years, okay? Because they, with a capital G, lowered the standards so far that now we expect, we have to have a little bit of corruption, we have to have a little bit of a bending of the rules. Next thing you know, You don't have a democracy anymore, representative or otherwise. So, some may complain that, oh, well, you said the same thing about Mueller. Well, I actually said don't put all your eggs in the Mueller basket. Okay? Knowing Mueller, some of us in the Bay Area weren't very pleased with him when he was U.S. attorney, going after immigrants and others. Low-hanging fruit. So, I thought that he was an institutionalist, and he did follow, I guess, the letter of the law. And I got to tell you, proved that, yes, Trump and his organization were in collusion with the Russians. And it wasn't up to him, because he was no longer in government, by the way. It wasn't up to him to determine if it was a crime. That was for others to decide, here is the evidence showing the crime. That's the part of the Mueller report even our friends in the corporate media fail to grasp. So there was I think, a very crass strategy as well, because when Mueller did give his testimony, he had old man palsy. Bit hesitant. His voice was quavering. Now, I should remind us that back in Watergate, Republicans tried the same gambit. Roger Stone. Yes, he was there, among others, who are still here now. And all of a sudden, I'm having a brain lock. But they brought out a very old guy to run the initial investigation. And he had a similar quavering of the voice. A very similar sort of hesitancy that's peculiar to the aged, which we are slowly, we're fast becoming. It only seems slow until it caught us. And now we're caught. But back to the matters at hand. I don't think Merrick Garland is in the same basket, shall we say, because it wasn't them that put Merrick Garland there. Of course, yeah, in a way they did by not letting him sit on the Supreme Court. Notice how the rules were bent. And then somehow our democracy, representative or otherwise, was threatened direly. Okay. All right. Well, all roads lead to civil war, apparently. That's the assessment from experts worldwide. Oh, my God. Domestic and worldwide. Have determined that we have all the hallmarks of a representative democracy slipping into civil war. We have all of the macro and micro examples. I mean, on our family, we're split just like they were in the Civil War. Brother against brother. Mm-hmm. Well, it is quite curious. I won't go in there because it'll just seem like I'm showing off. Showing off that the brother who dropped out of high school actually was kicked out, but because he was a juvenile delinquent. And but then somehow made millions and millions of dollars in the used car industry in Southern California. Yeah, I guess they have a market for that. Yeah, wholesale auctions as well as, some dealerships. But regardless, that Burgermeister turns out to be a Burgermeister for Trump. Yeah. Curious about that. While another brother, finished high school early. There's nothing left to take. Stuck around to be able to play some sports so he could play some sports in college. went to college, got some degrees, got some graduate level education under his belt, wrote a few things here and there, worked and volunteered. Well, I didn't quite volunteer, but worked for a contractor for UNICEF, among other things. Oh, yes, I must also mention spent a little bit of time in seminary school, too. Guess which brother thinks he knows more about faith? Mm-hmm. Well, let's put it this way. Both brothers think they know more about faith, but there's only one brother who puts it out there like, oh, yeah, I know more about faith than even the Pope. Of course you do. You never had to go through the rigors of what it means to understand faith. Okay. So, you have that pitted against in the family, and one brother's aligning themselves with, an insurgent coup. And the other brother, who's supposed to be like a dirty hippie, wants to preserve representative democracy. What a dirty hippie. Yeah, well, you know what? I'm not a hippie. I'm a punk. Punks kick back. Don't think for a moment that, when the Nazis come knocking on my door, they might have a few problems. They just might. When the KKK wants to have their midnight ride, the spray. The spray can be wide, depending on, the caliber. Just saying. They think that we're liberals. Oh, you can't have any armaments. You can't have any Second Amendment rights. You're a liberal. You don't like the Second Amendment. It's not about the Second Amendment, pal. Jesus. And I'll tell you something else, too. This is totally off the subject, but I'm amazed about how the gun nuts here don't know anything about hunting. And I thought that was like the first reason they had to have a gun. Well, we have to be able to go and hunt so that we can live off the land. And then the second reason, and then kill people. We also got to kill people because we're afraid. Got to have this weaponry because we're afraid. And they don't know anything about hunting. And the stupid liberal hippies have been here forever, know more about, duck tags, shall we say. When is it appropriate to be able to, fire on geese migrating across the vast expanse of the northwestern sky? All right. It's almost like they didn't really intend to use the guns for hunting. At least geese. Yep, that's where we are. Well, I wanted to get that Irish fisherman story under our belt. I just could not edit that clip. Because I think, yes, I do, but kudos to those Irish fishermen for standing up to Vlad. Now, I understand why NATO is, hanging back a little bit because, Vlad is obviously rattling sabers here. But you don't mess around with the Irish, especially when they're going after whitefish and holy mackerel. All right. We do have a curated show here, and we better get into it because the clip was long, and the rant, it'll just go on and on and on. Ranting. We don't want that. We want a little bit of order here, a little bit of curation, because that's what we do here in the salon that we call West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Well, on the rest of the menu, 500 acres of Northern California redwood forest has been returned to local Native American tribes. Domestic right-wing extremist groups view attacking the power grid as a means of disrupting the country. Well, get in line behind the Ruskies, pal. And Alabama appealed a federal court ruling that ordered the state to draw new congressional maps because the previous ones were racist as F. After the break, we move to the chef's table, where Spain broke up an international COVID passport forgery ring. Say that really fast. And 2 more Poles critical of the right-wing government have been identified as victims of phone hacking with the notoriously powerful Pegasus spyware. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. Near the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com, to the right of the page is the chat room link, and the chat room is monitored by the Kelly Lincoln. Thank you, Kelly. And if you would then take a gander across the page to the left, near the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com, right there, see it, is the link to our Patreon page. And if you could become a recurring Patreon of Netroots Radio, and if you could afford to send us the funds of what you might spend on an espresso-type coffee drink, if you could send those funds to us once a month, we're able to stretch those dollars beyond compare and pay our bills, which allows us to fly under the radar and continue this resistance against dark forces arrayed against the United States of America. And I'm not kidding. We have great experience at stretching those dollars, and we take our civic duty of resistance quite seriously. And thank you for helping us fulfill that civic duty, because we do take it very seriously. Even though we have a bit of gallows humor going on around here, how else can we survive? Yes, how else? Anyway, thank you for your generosity, and give you a little bit of pre-thanks for your generosity in the future. Near, I hope. Okay, anyway, thank you very much. If you would like to follow Netroots Radio on Twitter, you can do so at Netroots Radio. Tom takes care of that. Thanks, Tom. Follow me on Twitter at Justice Putnam. I post the show notes and links diary on Daily Co's about 10 minutes before showtime, and then get that posted up and linked up on social media like Twitter. Hopefully before the show begins, usually when the clip has already begun. Anyway, the show notes and links are very important, because that is where the real reportage is. The real. Follow the show on Twitter at Cookbook West, and pick up podcasts by way of Spreaker, Stitcher, TuneIn, iHeart, YouTube, iTunes. And you can find the deep archive from years of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and 11 years or so, going on 11 now, almost in just a couple of months, less, we'll have been continuously broadcasting 24/7, 365 for 11 years. You can find shows from way back at the Internet Archive. Links provided in the show notes and links diary. Isn't that nice? Yeah, we'll get it on the our webpage, our homepage at netrootsradio.com. Have just a little bit of formatting to do that, and I got to pick a time. There you go. All right, let's get into this first offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. It is out of the Associated Press by Brian Melly. The descendants of Native American tribes on the northern California coast are reclaiming a bit of their heritage that includes ancient redwoods that have stood since their ancestors walked the land. Save the Redwoods League planned to announce on Tuesday yesterday that it is transferring more than 500 acres on the Lost Coast to the Intertribal Sinkyone Wilderness Council, and they did indeed do that. The group of 10 tribes that have inhabited the area for thousands of years, almost like they have a life estate, will be responsible for protecting the land dubbed... Can I actually attempt this word, this term, in Native American language? Well, it translated, it means fish run place in the Sikione language. Priscilla Hunter, chairwoman of the council, said it is fitting, the tribal council said it is fitting they will be caretakers of the land where her people were removed or forced to flee before the forest was largely stripped for timber. It is a real blessing, said Hunter, of the Coyote Valley Band of Pomo Indians. It's like a healing for our ancestors. I know our ancestors are happy. This was given to us to protect. The transfer marks a step in the growing land back movement to return indigenous homelands to the descendants of those who lived there for millennia before European settlers arrived. The League first worked with the Sikione Council when it transferred a 66-hectare plot nearby to the group in 2012. The League recently paid $37 million for a scenic 5-mile stretch of the rugged and forbidding Lost Coast from a logging company to protect it from logging, and eventually opened it up to the public. Opening access to the public is not a priority on the property being transferred to the tribal group because it is so remote, said Sam Hodder, president and CEO of the League, but it serves an important puzzle piece wedged between other protected areas. Steep hills rise and fall to a tributary on the Eel River that has steelhead trout and coho salmon. The property was last logged about 30 years ago and still has a large number of old-growth redwoods as well as second-growth trees. The League purchased the land 2 years ago for $3.5 million, funded by Pacific Gas and Electric, to provide habitat for endangered northern spotted owl and marbled murrelet to mitigate other environmental damage by the utility. PG was set to emerge yesterday, Tuesday, from 5 years of criminal probation for a 2010 explosion triggered by its natural gas lines that blew up a San Bruno suburban neighborhood and killed 8 people. It's been blamed since 2017 for sparking more than 30 wildfires that wiped out more than 23,000 homes and businesses and killed more than 100 people. In an effort to reduce its liability and the chance of vegetation contacting power lines and sparking fires, PG&E has been criticized for destroying many large and old trees. Thanks to Save the Redwoods League for seizing an opportunity to protect lands on the Lost Coast that are vital to its conservation, Michael Everson, vice president of the Lost Coast League, said, which advocates for protecting water and wildlife in the area, but PG&E getting a green merit badge after all the destruction they're doing is not palatable. Of the Associated Press brings us this next offering here in the Bistro Cafe part of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. Extremist groups in the United States appear to increasingly view attacking the power grid as a means of disrupting the country, according to a government report aimed at law enforcement agencies and utility operators. Domestic extremists have developed credible, specific plans to attack electricity infrastructure since at least 2020, according to the report from the Department of Homeland Security's Office of Intelligence and Analysis. The document, dated Monday, was obtained yesterday, Tuesday, by the Associated Press. The report warns that extremists adhering to a range of ideologies will likely continue to plot and encourage physical attacks against electrical infrastructure, which includes more than 6,400 power plants and 450,000 miles of high-voltage transmission lines that span the country. Experts on the U.S. power grid have pointed out that it would be difficult to knock out power to the nation given the size and decentralized nature of the grid. The DHS report also notes that attackers, without inside help at least, would be unlikely to produce widespread multi-state outages, though they could still do damage and cause injuries. It comes as both the FBI and DHS have repeatedly warned in recent months that the U.S. faces a heightened threat from right-wing domestic extremists. Kim Chandler of the AP brings us this final offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Alabama yesterday, Tuesday, began appealing a federal court ruling that ordered the state to draw new congressional districts, including a second district with a substantial number of minority voters. The Alabama Attorney General's office filed a notice of appeal to the judge's order that blocked the current map for being used in the upcoming 2022 elections. The state argued similar maps had been used for decades with court approval, and the ruling is problematic with the closeness of the May primaries. The state also asked the judges to stay their order during the appeals process. A 3-judge panel on Monday issued a preliminary injunction that blocked Alabama from using its current map that created 1 heavily black district and 6 heavily white districts. Black voters have less opportunity than other Alabamians to elect candidates of their choice to Congress, the judges wrote in the ruling. The judges wrote that any remedial plan will need to include 2 districts in which black voters either comprise a voting age majority or something quite close to it. The ruling was a victory for Democrats who had argued the lines pack many black voters into a single district and limits the ability of black voters elsewhere to influence elections because they live in overwhelmingly white Republican districts. House Minority Leader Anthony Daniels said district lines should reflect the racial and political diversity of the state. Alabama's congressional delegation consists of 1 black Democrat and 6 white Republicans, while black people make up about 27% of Alabama's population. Daniels suggested it would be best for the court to go ahead and draw the districts. I suspect this will probably make it to the Supreme Court at some point, but I think that this is going to set the tone for the nation and addressing redistricting long term, he said. The 3 judges that issued the ruling consisted of 1 judge appointed by former President Bill Clinton, and senior U.S. District Judge Stanley Marcus, and 2 judges appointed by Donald Trump, U.S. District Judges Anna Manisco and U.S. District Judge Terry Moorer. The Alabama House Speaker told reporters that legislative leaders are discussing how to proceed. I guess they have to consult the ALEC, How to Destroy Democracy in a Box. I think that's what they need to consult. Well, we're meeting with legal and we're finding out what our options are, and at this point we don't know. We just gotta wait and see. Republican House Speaker Mac McCutcheon of Monrovia told reporters, I guess because they don't know how to legislate. After all, they're Republicans. All right, let's get to our break. And when we get back from that break, we will go through weather from around the world. And we will finish up with the stories that we've curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. And we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This is Take Two Movie Review. I'm Kim Lowe. This week, more moan than scream. Those of us old enough to remember the original Scream should recall that one reason it worked was that it flipped the horror genre on its head. Kevin Williamson's witty writing and the late horror legend Wes Craven's directing resulted in a self-deprecating film. It was fresh, fun, and its nod to the rules of horror recited by a character, as well as the sequel's movie within a movie, made the franchise meta before the term existed. However, after the third one, the movies fell into another horror movie cliche, tired and predictable. Even die-hard fans choked on the fourth one from 2011. This fifth one isn't officially called 5. It's not a sequel or reboot, but rather, as new character Mindy Meeks Martin explains, it's a requel. We have legacy characters and the backstory, but it's meant to launch off in new directions. Neve Campbell, Courtney Cox, and David Arquette are back to reprise their roles as Sidney Prescott, Gale Weathers, and Dewey Riley. They're older and have grown apart, but they reunite when yet another killer in the trademark Ghostface mask starts killing kids. Early on, it's made clear that a focus is going to be on the connection between this new killer and the original. While it's nice to see the legacy actors and characters, the best thing is seeing the original murder house, which arguably was as much of a character as any of the people in the original. The new movie doesn't quite measure up. Maybe it never could. While there are some decent jump tricks and suspense, plus a notable performance by Jack Quaid, this fifth Scream cries out for the directing and writing of Craven and Williamson, respectively. All said, though, it works for the fans and probably revives the franchise. This has been Take Two Movie Review. I'm Kim Lowe. Catch up with us at TakeTwoMovieReview.com and feed us back on our channel on YouTube.
This is Scientific American's 60-Second Science. I'm Christopher Intagliata. As it happens, tiger sharks have something in common with certain East Coasters.
During the winter when it's cold, they kind of snowbird down near the Bahamas and off of Florida. And then during the summer, they migrate north.
Neil Hammerschlag is director of the Shark Research and Conservation Program at the University of Miami. He and his colleagues analyzed 40 years of fishing catch data, and they found that as ocean waters have warmed, the shark's range has shifted some 250 miles to the north. The sharks, it seems, are chasing their preferred water temperatures toward the pole. They also tracked dozens of tiger sharks with satellite tags for 9 years, and they found similar results.
So taken together, we have several lines of evidence that tiger shark distributions and their migrations are changing from ocean warming, causing their distributions and migrations to extend and expand further north. And in these northern areas, they actually occur earlier in the year from ocean warming.
Their findings appear in the journal Global Change Biology. This shift matters, Hammerschlag says, because tiger sharks are apex predators, and where they go influences the food web beneath them. The sharks are also moving outside marine protected areas and into places where they could be more vulnerable to commercial fishing.
What this points to is that these marine protected areas need to consider current but also future changes in species distributions from ocean warming, and they certainly have to be adaptive and maybe, work with not only having marine protected areas, but also other types of protections like catch limits and other types of more traditional species conservation and management tools in addition to protecting places.
Now, if you don't find the ecological argument convincing, Hammerschlag pointed out one more implication. Although shark bites are relatively rare, he says, if tiger sharks shift their range and warm waters draw more bathers to the ocean, that could up the odds of an unfortunate encounter beneath the waves. Thanks for listening. For Scientific American's 60 Second Science, I'm Christopher Intagliata.
This is an important message from the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. When it snows this winter, make sure you clear more than your driveway. Before you hit the road and before you get in the driver's seat, check to be sure that your vehicle's tailpipe is clear of snow. If the tailpipe is blocked, carbon monoxide, an odorless, colorless, and deadly gas produced by your engine can build up quickly inside your vehicle, poisoning anyone inside. To learn more, call 1-800-CDC-INFO. That's 1-800-232-4636.
Hi, I'm Tom Hartman, and since you're listening to netrootsradio.com, show your progressive side and go to the donate button on the bottom of the homepage. It's progressives like you who power Netroots Radio and keep the progressive message beaming everywhere 24 hours a day. Just go to our donate button at the bottom of netrootsradio.com. Thank you for keeping progressive radio at full power.
Our society has coined expressions like philanthropist to encourage and hail people's charitable spirit. Look on the flip side of that shiny coin of generosity, however, and you'll find that its base substance is societal selfishness. After all, the need for charity only exists because we're tolerating intentional injustices and widespread inequality created by power elites. A society as supremely wealthy as ours ought not be relegating needy families and essential components of the common good to the whims of a few rich philanthropists. Yes, corporate and individual donations can help at the margins, but they don't fix anything. Thus, food banks, health clinics, etc. must constantly scrounge for more charity, while big donors have their charitable spirit subsidized with tax breaks that siphon money from our public treasury. Especially offensive to me is the common grandiose assertion by fat cat donors that charity is their way of, quote, giving back to society. Hello? If they can give so much, it's probably because they've been taking too much. As business columnist Andrew Ross Sorkin points out, all too often charitable gifts are used to make up for the failure of companies to pay people a living wage and treat their workers with dignity. It's not just the unemployed who rely on food banks, but janitors, nannies, Uber drivers, checkout clerks, and others who work full-time but are so poorly paid they can't make ends meet. That's not a sad charity case, but a matter of criminal exploitation by wealthy elites. And the charitable thing to do is to outlaw it and require a living wage for all. This is Jim Hightower saying, as Sorkin puts it, the aim should be to create a society where we don't need places like food banks. We should be trying to put the food banks out of business.
You are listening to 60 Second Civics from the Center for Civic Education. I'm Mark Gage. The Boston Massacre helped to convince many Americans that the British government was prepared to use military force to coerce the colonists into obedience. Although some British taxes on the colonies were repealed in 1770, the Tea Act in 1773 reasserted Parliament's right to tax the colonists and led to the Boston Tea Party. This name was given to the event in 1773 when colonists, dressed as Mohawk Indians, boarded 3 British ships and dumped 45 tons of tea into Boston Harbor. The British government responded with what the colonists called the Intolerable Acts, a series of punitive acts, as the British called them, that, among other things, closed Boston Harbor to all trade. These measures attacked representative government by altering the Massachusetts Charter to give more power to the new royal governor, limiting town meetings, weakening the court system, and authorizing British troops to occupy the colony. That's all for today's episode, 60 Second Civics, where civic education only takes a minute.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1897, and the founding charter of the Amalgamated Meat Cutters Union was formed out of the merger of 7 other unions. What made the meat cutters unique for its time was that it included both skilled, or craft labor, and unskilled, or industrial workers. Organizing this complex workforce was made even more difficult because of the diversity of skills and ethnic makeup of the laborers that made up the stockyards. From the Civil War until the 1920s, the stockyards on Chicago's South Side were the heart of the meatpacking industry. Railways from Chicago brought meat raised on Midwestern grazing lands and farms to East Coast markets. In 1880, the Chicago stockyards processed 20 million cows and pigs. The workers who processed these animals worked in deplorable and unsafe conditions for low wages. In 1904, the Amalgamated Meat Cutters Union led a major strike in the stockyards of Chicago. Author Upton Sinclair included the strike in his famous novel, The Jungle. The strike was broken, in part by management bringing in scab labor. African Americans were among that scab labor. Black workers had been largely excluded from union leadership in the yards. At the time, black workers also were often organized into segregated locals, especially in the skilled trades. The failure of the 1904 strike evidenced the importance of organizing workers across racial and ethnic lines. It was an example of the long-standing tactic by management to attempt to divide workers by race and ethnicity, a tactic that continues to this day, highlighting the labor call of united we bargain, divided we beg. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, and follow us on the Twitters at Labor History in 2.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. We always begin, whether from around the world, along the banks of the Rogue River, in the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 25 degrees Fahrenheit, expecting a high in the mid-50s, and that's a bit cooler than what we had yesterday, at least for forecast. Abundant sunshine a little later on, partly cloudy currently, and winds will be light and variable. Clear skies overnight with lows in the low 30s, about 30. Can't get much lower than that, in the 30s, of course. Winds remaining light and variable, and sunny tomorrow with highs maybe about 57. Winds light and variable. Confirmed cases of coronavirus have been updated and continue to rise in Jackson County in the southern part of Oregon. We now stand at 361,018 confirmed cases, and our deceased have also increased by another 5, and we now stand at 423 deceased in this county alone. Grass pollen is rated as none right outside the window here in Rogue River proper. The air quality index for the Rogue River region is good at 30 parts per million, and the daytime UV index is low at level 2. Barometric pressure is rising at 30.22 inches. Visibility is at 7 miles, and relative humidity is at 87%. Weather from around the world is brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world. London is 46 degrees and mostly cloudy. Paris is 38 and cloudy. Rome is 53 degrees and partly cloudy. Kyiv is 28 and cloudy. Kabul is 17 degrees and clear. Hong Kong is 62 and mostly cloudy. Tokyo is 41 and clear. Sydney, Australia is 72 and partly cloudy. San Francisco, California is 45 degrees with heavy fog and a fog advisory for onshore and offshore for small craft. It is an advisory. Do take care. And New York is a freezing 23 degrees Fahrenheit, but it is sunny as hell. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world. Staff at Reuters brings us this first amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Spanish police said they had detained 7 suspected members of an international criminal gang that created and sold forged COVID-19 passports and negative tests. The Spanish arm of the ring, which advertised its services on anti-vax instant messaging groups, fraudulently added at least 1,600 people to the National Vaccination Register with the help of health workers. The investigation found EU countries agreed last year to create a standard COVID certificate with a QR code so vaccinated and tested people could travel and attend events. That created a demand for forgeries. Police arrested 6 people in Madrid and 1 in Barcelona, but did not provide further information on them. They will be charged with document forgery and offenses against public health. The investigation continues into the possible theft of passwords to the register, the National Police added in a statement. The gang divided customers into 2 groups based on income and charged either $225 US or, what's $1,000? I guess it would be about $1,200 US for a fake COVID vaccination certificate, which would be sent within 2 days of payment. A negative PCR test cost, just about $55 US. Police are now investigating the 1,600 people added to the register fraudulently. The organization's leaders operated from France, where, unlike most of Spain, a vaccination passport is mandatory to enter public spaces like restaurants or movie theaters. Spanish police passed all the information to French authorities.
Je te donne ce mon amour pour la vie entière. La promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle. C'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer, mes automnes quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers.
Vanessa Guerra of the Associated Press brings us this final amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. 2 more Poles have been identified as victims of phone hacking with the notoriously powerful spyware from Israel's NSO group, an agrarian political leader at odds with Poland's right-wing government, and the co-author of a book about the head of Poland's secret services. The newest discovery by Citizen Lab cyber sleuths broadens a list of those allegedly targeted by state surveillance under Poland's nationalist government with a tool marketed for use exclusively against criminals and terrorists. Well, that brings us to the end of our broadcast period for the day, but you do know Netroots Radio broadcasts on, and we will meet up tomorrow for Metro Shrimp and Grist Thursdays. So do stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day and all night for all the breaking news as it breaks, and we'll meet up here tomorrow, right here in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théâtres, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Robe à fleurs, sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin l'âge tombe, nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goël. Je voudrais toujours te plaire dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair, t'embrasser les yeux ouverts dans mon jardin d'hiver. Pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin l'âge tendre, nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver.